Look, for many, many years before I took office, the state underinvested in our infrastructure and it was left crumbling. It was costing drivers an average of over $500 a year in flat tires and wear and tear from potholes and misaligned pavement. And it was costing us jobs because businesses that want to manufacture or distribute their goods decide that they can't do it in Illinois if it isn't maintaining its roads and bridges. That's why we need Rebuild Illinois now. And with the innovative new law that I signed in June, we're authorizing design-build project implementation, as the Secretary mentioned. We're saving taxpayers money and streamlining our construction process and timeline. I want to express my sincere gratitude to the General Assembly for authorizing this critical assessment tool, and I especially want to recognize Representative Cam Buckner and Senator Ram Vilivalam for their leadership in getting it done. I want to thank Mayor James Langfelder for his leadership here in Springfield, and more broadly for standing up and making sure that we're investing in infrastructure right here for the residents of Springfield. And I want to express my gratitude also to Senator Doris Turner, who, yes, was part of city government for a long time, but that means she brought to state government the experience of somebody who really knows what needs to get done for her constituents. I want to thank them both for joining us today. Together, we are literally paving the way for generations to come. At its very core, Rebuild Illinois and this MYP are an investment in our future, one that leads to economic prosperity and environmental sustainability. So thank you, and with that, I'd like to introduce the great senator from this district, Senator Doris Turner.
Good morning. Oh, y'all are so weak. It's a beautiful day. The state fair is here. I'm very excited to be here today. The multi-year plan being unveiled today is a monumental step forward in building a more transparent and equitable transportation system. Dedicating billions of state and federal funds, we are using new equity-based metrics to guide essential infrastructure improvements. This will help create new jobs, promote safe roads, bridges, and highways, and connect communities across Illinois. Over the next 6 years, these projects will focus on more than just completion, but also on revitalizing the communities they take place in. Metrics like environmental impact, accessibility, safety, and increased benefits to underserved communities will be at the forefront of these projects. So let me repeat that if you didn't hear it. Metrics like environmental impact, accessibility, safety, and increased benefits to underserved communities will be at the forefront of these projects. And I repeated that because it's very important. As we work in partnership with local governments to revitalize and address blight in our underserved communities, infrastructure needs and how we address them will dictate our success and dictate the success of those communities. And that cannot be understated. I was proud to support the bipartisan legislation that established these metrics, and am eager to see their results in communities across Illinois. A little over 3 years ago, as the alderman that represented Ward 3 in the city of Springfield, I had the great honor to stand with Governor Pritzker as he signed the legislation that brought all of this into fruition. There was a vision that, with the stroke of that pen, went in, changed from vision to putting feet behind that vision and putting it in process. And so today we see the steady movement of that vision, and I cannot be more prouder of what that is going to mean, not only for the 48th District and the city of Springfield, but for the entire state of Illinois. And with that, I would invite Governor Pritzker back for questions.
Happy to take any questions from members of the media.
How that's going to save money. Can you kind of unpack that a bit more? What we're changing from to design-build?
I'm going to let the expert, the secretary, answer the question directly, although I have my own version of the answer. Secretary.
Most likely it's not different from mine, Governor. But design-build, it does eliminate at least one step. The traditional version is you design, you bid, and you build. All these are separate team. Design, build, puts the designer and the contractor, in a sense, together in one room as a team so they could design it and build it as they go. That brings in a greater sense of, first of all, transparency, because the department is still watching over that process, and expediency. So we won't take, sometimes our larger projects especially, it takes much longer time to put out for letting, so to speak, and for the contractor to start building. Is bringing that entire team up front together, working together, and putting that project out there in a practical term early on.
Was there a cap on what project cost design build?
I do believe that the legislators does cap it at $400 million over the next 6 years, but
Per project?
no, for the entire program. Yes, that's a cap.
Can you put a dollar figure on how much inflation has, increased the cost of projects from, last year or even earlier this year to this point?
Right, that's a great question, and I'm going to give you a range from what I know for us here, and it's very, very similar to our adjacent state, the Indiana, the Missouri, Iowa. Typically, the inflation has caused at least 10% increase in the price. Sometimes it depends on the project itself, because some of the commodities and some of the materials is pretty hard to get, especially on the steel and the bituminous material side. Sometimes when the market dries up, the price goes up. But we're seeing a little bit of stability right now, at least, but we have seen an increase of at least 10%.
And the raw materials, steel, I'm guessing also fuel, concrete, what else?
Those are the main component, is steel and the asphalt material. Yes, sir.
Secretary or the governor outlined a lot of different projects. There's other projects that have been going on for a long time, years even. Like, for instance, Chicago area, I-290, the Jane Byrne interchange further south, the I-80 bridge.
Absolutely.
Is this funding going to speed up some of those existing projects, or is this strictly going towards new projects?
You did mention the I-290. I-290 is slated to be done later this year, or perhaps earlier next year, because there are some components of it, like siding and whatnot, that could be done without closing a lane. So we anticipate I-290 to be done sometimes early spring next year. Having said that, I-290 funding has been made available through Rebuild Illinois. Yes, it's not necessarily contingent on our plan today. The multi-year program we unveiling today is meant for other projects to come down the road. Newer projects, yes.
It allowed you to get more federal money because there's a plan?
Indeed it did. And I think there's one pager that we're going to distribute. It's going to show at least $1.4 billion coming in strictly for bridges. That is a main focus of our federal FHWA partners. Bridges across the nation, as we know, are getting pretty old, and most of them are in need of replacement. So they allocated $1.4 billion over the next 5 years for IDOT to use strictly on bridges. Having said that, the federal package itself, as an overall, has increased by at least 20% for us. So if we're getting, say, if we're getting about $10 billion, now we're getting at least $12 billion, for as an example.
So $20 billion, how much of that is federal money versus state money?
Of the 20, it's actually 24.6 is the highway program. The governor did say over 20 billion. A little over half of it is the federal side. I think we have around 11 billion or so. If I remember correctly, Howie, 11 billion or so for the state.
Governor, after the revelation.
I'm sorry, can we just hold 1 second? I just want to complete an answer, which is one of the best things about the federal program is that the match that the state has is 20% and 80% from the federal government. And because we passed Rebuild Illinois 2.5 years before the IIJA was passed, we actually are shovel ready. We have the resources available. There are a lot of other states that have to come up with those dollars, don't know where they're going to come from. And so we're really in a position to do much more quickly. That's a terrific thing for Illinois. Yes, ma'am.
After the revelations yesterday evening that President Trump may have taken nuclear documents to Mar-a-Lago, what are you expecting to hear out of Illinois Republicans, especially those who are loyal to President Trump?
Well, I'm shocked and dismayed, honestly, that Republicans across Illinois haven't stood up for law enforcement, haven't stood up for law and order, and instead are standing with somebody that clearly there is something afoot here that may lead to a prosecution. It seems like, Republicans say that they're anti-crime, and yet here they are standing up for somebody who seems to have committed one.
Governor, CDC relaxed guidance, I think in particular treating or not treating unvaccinated versus vaccinated differently. Are you going to change, for instance, the teacher mandate, the school staff mandate, that they either vaccinate or test?
We're going to be adopting the CDC's guidance. We're going through it today. There are obviously a lot of components of it. It wasn't just about schools. And so we'll be making an announcement about that as soon as we can. But we want to align with the CDC. I think they're doing good work on this. And we want to make sure our schools, of course, are open, as they have been, by the way, for the last 2 years.
What about the emergency declarations? We've gone almost 2
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
The emergency declarations, the COVID emergency proclamations.
Yeah.
We're like 2.5 years into it. 30-day disaster proclamations. Are we done with it yet?
I think you keep focusing on the wrong thing. The fact is that those disaster declarations have among them a number of provisions that are executive orders that have been ratcheted down. In fact, we're all the way down to the very bare minimum, and we are concurrent with the federal disaster proclamation, which is still in place. And so we'll be leaving that in place to make sure that we're getting the maximum amount of federal funding for the state of Illinois. I want to remind you that Illinois historically has been a donor state to the rest of the country. We don't get back in Illinois the tax dollars that we send to Washington, D.C. We ought to get those dollars back, and this is one of the ways that we can do that. But very importantly, this is about making sure that we're dealing with COVID-19, ratcheting all the way down, keeping people safe, because COVID-19 has not gone away. And those dollars that come from the federal government are very helpful for us in order to combat that.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.